Good evening to you all. Thank you for being here tonight. We're going to get started. We'll have a few more folks trickling in. Find a seat anywhere you'd like. So tonight is the culmination of many months of hard work by you and your staff and our team. And my name is Amanda Morrill, and I've had the privilege of managing this project for Stantec. And with me tonight I have Tim Tresalevi, our mobility expert, Jaquacia Colon in the back, one of our talented urban designers. And we're actually on Facebook Live tonight, so hopefully we have a lot more Apex citizens joining us via that network. And so Stacy's up front taking care of that for us. So first of all, I want to let you know that we really started this project back in March. And we came to town and met your wonderful steering committee of 18 local citizens who have really been the champions of this project. They came to our meetings regularly. They walked in the summer heat with us around town. They took on the Parklet Challenge and built a parklet on Salem Street. And we're going to ask them to be plan ambassadors as we move toward implementation. We came for 2 days of public input sessions where we had 9 different topic areas that we discussed with over 65 different residents. We had a fantastic public open house where we met over 130 of you all. We had a fantastic online survey response. Nearly 2,000 people in your community responded, which is incredible. A youth survey, a parklet survey that had 90% positive reaction, mind you. We visited your local breweries, had casual conversations with your citizens, and that all culminated in the June week-long design charrette that I see many familiar faces from in the room. So I show you all that to say thank you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for caring enough about your community to show up and help create this vision. So I want to begin tonight by telling you a story about my visit to downtown Apex in the year 2030. Now you're going to have to tolerate this mama's emotions because I have an 8-month-old and an 8-year-old. So imagining them as 11 and 19 is hard on my heart a little bit. So I'm going to try to get through this without crying. Visiting from the south on 55, as I always do, my husband plus our 2 boys make our way toward the Apex Peakway intersection. I'm pleased to see a wayfinding sign telling me that the historic downtown is just 1 mile ahead. When I reach the intersection of 55 in Salem, I'm blown away at the details. The crisp white crosswalks, the flowers blooming at the boutique hotel, stunning signage telling me to turn right on Salem Street. Wow. Look at that incredible building. It's the multimodal transit station. The glass and wood are so iconic. The restaurant across the street is already filling up for the night with people all in the rooftop bar enjoying the beautiful North Carolina weather. Shannon and her family will be meeting me there tomorrow night for reservations. We wait for the light to turn green as cyclists and pedestrians continue along to their destinations. And look at there. It's the Go Apex autonomous shuttle. I heard it was up and running. We make a quick right into where we'll be staying for the weekend. This boutique hotel at 55 in Salem Street is such a lovely building. It really fits into the Apex aesthetic. We park the car, check into our room, and I ask the concierge what's going on in town tonight. And he informs me that a great local band is performing at the weekly Singing on Seaboard. We'll have to check that out later for sure. It's such a lovely night here in Apex. I think we'll take a stroll up Salem Street. We meet lots of people along the walk, some heading down to the brew pub at 55, some walking home from work, and everybody excited that it's Friday. Would you look at that? The old Hollins Jeweler building has changed quite a bit. Oh, I see. The jeweler is moved to the back of the building and activated the front with a cafe. We'll definitely visit there in the morning for breakfast. They're serving $2 mimosas. Here's the heart. Salem Street is hopping. The wide sidewalks are filled with people and cafe tables and umbrellas. And these trees, whoa, the way they framed this street is incredible. Not many cars, although I do see an Uber dropping off a group of ladies down at the Provincial for what looks to be a night on the town. There goes that Go Apex autonomous shuttle again. Wonder where they're heading. Everywhere I turn, there are people of all ages. Look at that cool pedestrian alley. The string lights make it such a dreamy space, and the tables are already full. There's artwork everywhere I turn. This one telling the story of the original log pond. And look at that cute little bronze beaver. I can't wait to take my youngest on the art scavenger hunt tomorrow. Well, now I feel like I have arrived. The plaza space in front of the depot is so lovely, full of people playing games and enjoying this Friday night. The splash pad is adding such a great sound of water, and the kids squealing as it hits them warms my heart. They'll be having the farmers market here in the morning, something else on our itinerary. Man, we've worked up a good thirst. Oh, look, it's the brewery. I've heard about this place on the town's Instagram feed. They have taps from all the local breweries in-house. Swinging in here for sure. Time to keep going. We want to check out the community garden before the sun goes down. Almost there now. Oh, nice. Look, the hangout. Love these planters, and the murals are so dynamic. Maybe we can visit this place for lunch tomorrow after the boys enjoy the skate park. We make our way across the railroad at the Strollway Crossing, and I can see the Tunstall House in the distance. The renovations on this place have come such a long way. Look at the big white tent set up. There must be a wedding tomorrow. Now this is what I came to see, the community garden. It's immaculate, and they're going to have an abundant harvest to pick this weekend. The pollinator garden planted by the Bee City Committee is beautiful, and my Reed is loving that interactive signage teaching him about the importance of pollinators. I think we'll sit here on this covered swing and watch the sunset. I mean, we are at the peak of the peak. That is so beautiful. There's something about this quaint small town. I just love it. Okay, hunger has definitely set in with me and my boys. I can't wait to hear that new band on Seaboard. Strolling back to Salem Street this time of night is so lovely. The street lights are all coming on, and I'm still passing so many people. What a way to end the night. Delicious food, my favorite boys, the band back here at Singing on Seaboard. Downtown Apex has such a cool vibe. We may never leave. The designs and plans for your downtown are based in market realities. Our talented designers can come up with incredible transformations and beautiful designs, but we rely on experts like Larissa Ortiz and Laurie Volk to make sure that what we're designing is based in market reality. And I wanted to tell you that Larissa was going to be here tonight. She had a plane cancellation from New York City, so we're certainly missing her tonight. But Larissa's group really approaches downtown retail environments and central business districts in a unique way. She worries about things like demand and the right mix and understanding your competition, but she also likes to understand how downtown is managed, along with the actual physical environment and how these businesses really work together as a district. Larissa also wanted to really understand who your primary trade area was. And she found that about 60 to 80% of your primary trade area is within that 10 to 15 mile drive. Now, one of the key takeaways from Larissa's evaluation was that you have about 95,000 square feet of retail on Salem Street in that core couple of blocks, which is a great number, but it's not currently working in unison together. It's almost functioning as three separate micro districts, if you will. So you're not getting all the bang for your buck as a really themed festival district because you do have that, lack of cohesion. So that was a challenge for us as urban designers, right? She told us to fix the problem. So identifying where those gaps were on Salem and figuring out how can we make the pedestrian experience a continuous one. Encourage shoppers to continue from one microclimate to another. She felt like you all were doing really great, that your local businesses are really serving your community well. You're only losing about 15 cents on the dollar spent when it comes to retail, which is fantastic. This was sort of the program that Larissa ended up giving us as we were thinking about adding square footage to Salem Street in particular. So the goal for us was to add to what you already have and make it a true cohesive district, finding things that complement what you have and situating them strategically along those couple of blocks. So with Larissa and Laurie's housing advice in hand, we then had to marry those realities with what we were hearing from you all, right? So it had to be a two-legged thing, right? So we wanted the plan to be what your vision was. So working with the steering committee, the town staff, and listening to you all, we put together a list of 3 guiding principles. We would measure every goal and recommendation off of these 3 principles. They're very simple. Put people first, celebrate Salem Street, and embrace authentic Apex. Now the guiding principles then lead into the key goals, right? So we're going to work through each of those key goals, and I'm going to give you specific project examples and designs of how you can attain those recommendations. And the first goal, manage parking efficiently and effectively.
Parking's a wonderful thing. It's a great challenge to have, and every great, vibrant place I've ever been in has a parking problem. It's a good problem to have, so let's keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to managing parking as efficiently as possible, it's a 4-step process. We begin with your experiences with parking. It's not about what the numbers say entirely. It's about how people are using and how people want to continue to use your existing parking resources. The second phase is to supplement that information, that anecdotal information, with some data. And the third phase is to provide some sort of technical analysis and expertise, so ultimately we can guide you towards some management strategies. And then, most importantly, you repeat it all over again. Because the best thing about parking management is it's continually evolving. So I'm going to use terms like evaluation, or to continually update, and that's what I'm talking about, repeating of this process, because behaviors change, parking changes over time. Now, we spent several months reaching out, getting feedback, talking to as many people as we can, polling them, having interactive discussions, having them vote and make decisions. So we spoke with community members, we held focus group meetings and discussions, we had some public workshop events, and we had some steering committee members provide input as well. All this culminated in our design charrette as well in June, where we put a lot of ideas on paper. And what a fun experience it was. Supplementing that with the data we have, we really need to better understand how many spaces, who owned which spaces, where were they located. We started with a much grander parking study area and narrowed to what the focus really was, which is about a 2 to 3 minute walk from Salem Street. Within that area, there's about 1,200 parking spaces, or just shy, and half of those are publicly owned and half of those are privately owned. So in order to manage more efficiently, we need to understand what, where, and how many. We then had occupancy counts or utilization trends to try to figure out when certain areas are busy with parkers and what time of day and to what order of magnitude. This is just one example of many sample points, but it represents the 2 busiest times of the day during our collection periods. Lunchtime in February and an evening dinner time in May. And you can see there's individual lots that are much more heavily utilized than other lots. And so that pattern starts to reveal itself where people's demand really is, and now we're just trying to manage that demand as efficiently as possible, recognizing that it does change over the day, it'll change over the seasons, and from year to year it will change again. So we're back to that evaluation phase where we're trying to get as much data to discover your trend over time and repeat. What do we recommend? Yes, we do recommend. In our workshop, we were kind of presented with 5 buckets of parking management strategies, and within those buckets, there are several options to choose from. I think we filtered those down to a really reasonable strategy in the first 3 years of what can be accomplished, and then leaving items that maybe would take a little bit longer, cost a little bit more, or maybe would have to follow in sequence. So they're in the second bucket of strategies. But they're all different phases. In the first half, we're really looking at improving education and awareness, getting wayfinding signage, and improving your walkability to parking areas to better utilize your existing resources that may be just a little further out. Having some shifts in enforcement strategies, maybe that's just time limits. Maybe we're working towards a longer shift of paid on-street parking for the highest of demand areas. That will be something that will evolve over time, but isn't a recommendation in the first 3 years. Maybe it's for the last 3 years. And of course, adding new parking where feasible. And that is the next slide, which everyone can't wait to discuss. There are plenty of opportunities to add maybe 100 on-street parking spaces within a reasonable walking distance. There's also some off-street parking opportunities involving restriping certain parking lots that can get you about another 100 to 200, depending on how aggressively we want to chase this. So the net gain potential is anywhere between 100, 120 to maybe 200 with just easy, quick, relatively low-cost fixes. We also wanted to examine, and we did examine several locations for a structured parking deck. That will net you about the same 300 parking spaces, but they'll all be parked in one single location. So the advantage of this strategy is traffic is a little bit more dispersed, and the advantage of a consolidated is everyone knows exactly where the parking is located. They just have to drive to it. Can you imagine the traffic challenges that come with that? So they're roughly about the same order of magnitude of benefit, but the cost of a structured parking deck would be 4 to 5 times higher than the strategies that would get you the same net gain, although dispersed in several locations. So they're about apples to apples, except for cost and proximity. Right. Goal number 2.
Awesome. Thank you. So Tim is the hero. Solved all your parking problems. Now we can move on to the fun stuff. Great. All right. So the second key goal is to make Salem Street the best public space in the region. Salem is the heart of your downtown, right? We all know that. And today there are spatial and safety issues that this vision really needed to address. You have about 30 on-street parking spaces out there today, and at a minimum you would want to restrike those to code. You can do that lengthwise and get them about 22 feet in length, which would bring them up to sort of safety standards. But the folks in this room do not like to do the minimum. So during the charrette, we came up with a couple of different options for how we could approach Salem Street. I'm going to move through some of those options, and I want you to really pay attention as we talk through these, because you might have a chance later to vote on your favorite. So, the 4 options. We looked at what happens when you only have parallel parking on one side, but on the other side you make a really great wide sidewalk, about 17 feet. We looked at an alternate where we call it alternating long, which is essentially half the block on each side would get a wide sidewalk and half the block on each side would have parking. We looked at alternating short, we call it, which is essentially doing that same sort of pattern but in a shorter situation. And we looked at what happens if you get rid of all the parking on Salem Street. So the ultimate solution and goal, right, let's understand that. First of all, we're trying to increase sidewalk space wherever possible, and we're trying to introduce street trees, because as you all know, it's very hot here in North Carolina. So, we wanted to experience these options as a human being would experience them, right? So we created a 3D model, and we're going to move through the 4 different options. So I really do want you to imagine yourself in these spaces and see which proposed condition you really like the best. So, Salem Street, one side parking. So pros obviously being one entire side of Salem Street gets this great wide sidewalk with all the urban amenities you can think of. And the parallel parking on the opposite side is actually striped to code, width and lengthwise. So you have a safer parking situation. And, cons would be certainly that side of the street still has the narrow sidewalk. And right now, there's no trees on that side. So you could think about maybe taking a couple of those parking spaces and adding a few trees on that side, depending on how much parking you are willing to lose. Now, retailers and restaurants love that convenience parking outside their businesses. So, another pro to consider. So that's option one. Everybody got it? Option two, Salem Street alternating long, the essentially half-block situation. So pros on this, obviously, that both sides of the street get some extent of wide sidewalk and urban amenities. They also get street trees, which is great. You do maintain the parallel parking on the other half blocks. Unfortunately, because of cost, you wouldn't be able to move the curb and get an 8-foot parallel parking space, so that parking would remain substandard and be 7 feet in width. So not a super safe condition, but y'all are dealing with it today. So that's alternating long. Alternating short, again, a similar approach, but you're creating these smaller sort of outdoor rooms in front of different businesses. You're still maintaining some level of on-street parking. You're getting the great street trees that really start to feel like they're providing that enclosure to the street because they're happening more regularly. Of course, a con, some of the sidewalk is still that narrow situation, and you still have substandard parking at a 7-foot width. The final option to consider is what happens if we get rid of on-street parking on Salem Street just for these couple of blocks. You know, the pro, obviously, both sides of Salem Street benefit from wide urban sidewalks with every amenity you can dream of, and you can see some of those in the imagery. Both sides get continuous street trees, so you really have that sense of enclosure, the shade. The repetition is going to slow cars down. Narrowing that street like that is going to slow cars down. You would have a couple of drop-off areas, certainly, for different uses. A con on this, I would say, is you don't have the parallel parking, right, that some retailers and restaurants do rely on. So, everybody keep all that in your head, okay? Goal number 3 is to create vibrant spaces for people to gather. We took a look at your 2 major alleys. What happened? Oh, there's no people? Yeah. So all of our existing photography had no people. We didn't really do that on purpose, but promise, we didn't take the people out. So Commerce Street, right? So we wanted to create a vibrant people place, right? So you hear us talk about mixed use in buildings. Well, public spaces should be mixed use too. And for this one in particular, it should be able to accommodate cars and people and moms with strollers coming from Julia's grocery school and young entrepreneurs outside the work incubator space, changing the world with their ideas, all in a beautiful, dynamic space. Seaboard Street. Now, this is an alley that just saw fantastic public investment. You have great public parking that was just striped along the railway back on Seaboard. So what happens to this space now? Does it continue to be this? A wasteland of unconsolidated dumpsters and the occasional convenient employee parking space? Or do you work together to create this? A space with lighting and landscaping and people. We looked at buildings around downtown that have perfectly fine businesses in them today, but envisioned a future where they might become people places. When public investment, like a new sidewalk that's going in, and a new Holly Springs Express bus stop in the general vicinity, meet private investment and a vision for vibrancy. Or a fantastic business that you are lucky to have on your tax rolls, decides to partner with a local entrepreneur and move to the back of their building and put a cafe out on the Salem frontage. Or an empty building and parking lot on your main street transforms into a mixed-use building with active ground floor uses, wide sidewalks, outdoor dining, a rooftop bar, maybe even a penthouse apartment. Or maybe we think about it as 3 stories with upper story living and creating more vibrancy for downtown. Now again, call Tim the hero. He solved all your parking problems. So these 6 spaces at Saunders and Salem, who needs them? So we saw it as another opportunity to perhaps increase square footage in your downtown. Again, activating ground floor uses, upper story living opportunities that yield vibrancy. Now, as I mentioned, Laurie Volk, our housing expert, she conducted a thorough housing analysis for the entire study area. Our goal was to really take those recommendations and find ways to do this. Expand housing options that promote equity. Now, Laurie's entire findings will be in the document and will be very interesting to Apex housing developers, but I'm going to briefly summarize her findings tonight. So Laurie first wanted to understand who are the households that represent potential new units in Apex, right? So once she understood that, then she needed to understand what the total number of potential new units in the study area would be. Then she took a conservative approach to figure out a percentage of that number that she felt like the market could really absorb. So what she told us was that around 100 new units each year annually for the next 5 years. And these are unit types that are multifamily, single family, for sale, for rent. She gave very specifics about the mix that she saw working here. So one of the areas we took a look at related to housing was the Shangri-La Mobile Home Park at South Salem and the Peakway. Now, it's a situation where you essentially have one parcel, one owner, so it's not unreasonable to think that change might occur in the future. And we proposed a mixed income neighborhood with various housing typologies, a mix of for rent and for sale, a place that has common open spaces that preserve the beautiful existing trees in this area, larger community greenway connections, and what we actually ended up with was double the units that were actually in this, along with all the amenities I mentioned. Justice Heights, a historically African-American neighborhood full of homes and churches, and there's some recent investments in this neighborhood related to streets and West Street Park. What we wanted to do was explore sensitive infill. Now, we're not talking about rebuilding, removing any of the houses in Justice Heights. We were trying to find the interiors of the block where we could essentially add more units within walking distance of your downtown. We really only added about 15 units in that one specific neighborhood. But the other thing we did was look at opportunities on Salem to add in neighborhood commercial, employment opportunities south of 55. Now, as you move up on South Salem, sort of north of 55, what we wanted to do was kind of knit back together that grand residential street that leads to your heart. And in this area, we actually ended up adding about 60 new units. We also looked at a couple of blocks really close to the heart, really close to Salem Street. And these are all within your historic overlay district. So these are the existing conditions of what is out there today. So first we wanted to look at what happens when you add alleys and accessory dwelling units. Now, accessory dwelling units are an affordable unit type for this area. Then we dug a little deeper. What happens if some of the non-contributing structures in this historic district were to turn over time and redevelop? In this one block, we added 100 units within a 5-minute walk of your downtown. We also took a look at the food line at Laura Duncan and the Peakway. Now, this is a typical suburban big box development with a sea of asphalt, but there's so many new neighborhoods that have emerged around this area. We really wanted to start thinking about it as a neighborhood center. One that fills in over time with buildings that address the street and hide parking in the rear, with infrastructure that ties into existing neighborhoods, adding mixed-use opportunities for neighborhood level commercial, and eventually becoming a walkable, bikeable center that has additional housing typologies, including townhomes and upper story lofts, all within a 10-minute walk of your downtown. Now, much of the connectivity that is desired in and around downtown is going to be taken care of with your advanced APEX recommendations, your transportation plan. But we did want to note some of the connectivity that we see as being critical path to the success of this plan. So, identifying those streets where there are needed improvements and opportunities to create a more walkable and bikeable environment, particularly in that 5-minute and that 10-minute walk that you see on the screen. So the center of that 5-minute circle that you just saw, that's the heart of Salem, right? And so we worked really hard to create that theme festival district, right, that Larissa told us about, trying to hit that 150,000 square foot mark. And I'd say we got pretty darn close. You see those totals up there. And then we certainly hit Lori's mark on housing units for the study area as well. But how do we connect all these people to the heart? So we looked at streets like Center and Chatham, where you have enough existing asphalt that it can be reallocated with on-street parking, as Tim mentioned. Now, what on-street parking does is it slows cars down and it makes it a more walkable, bikeable neighborhood street. So there are also planned investments that the town already has on the books for pedestrian enhancements in these locations as well. Now, Saunders and Mason, similar situation. And North Salem, which I know has been a speed problem for public safety in the past, restriping this would go a long way in creating a more walkable and bikeable area there. This is also, again, I'll remind you, the area where there will be the Holly Springs Express that will go from downtown Cary to downtown Holly Springs right through Apex. And speaking of regional connectivity, how do we take a planned transit investment and make it an iconic one? So we know transit is coming through here on 55, right? So do we want it to be an enhanced transfer station, a glorified bus shelter, or do we want it to be a true multimodal center for Apex? This would be a place where you could not only pick up a regional bus connector, but maybe you pick up the Go Apex local transit coordinate connector. Maybe one day it's autonomous. Shannon and I are working on that. But maybe you also can jump on a community bike or a scooter, all of these emerging technologies that are hitting some of our towns and communities across the nation. Now, we all know that Apex knows how to put on a festival, okay? So, one of the first things I learned when I got here, y'all know how to do big festivals. And y'all do them really well. But it's the smaller, more frequent events that yield vibrancy. So, we want to encourage a diversity of activities and programming. But you need public spaces to program, right? So, again, Tim solved all your parking problems. These 20 spaces in front of the depot, we saw it as a fantastic opportunity to create a flexible public space, simply designed, curbless, in fact, with shade trees and movable seating and umbrellas, permeable pavers, a splash pad, even a cascading water wall that's on the plaza side of the accessible ramp leading up to the depot. A place that can host your farmer's market on Saturdays and even be an ice rink during the holidays. So, programming and all of these great things are wonderful, but people have to be able to find them, right? And they have to feel welcome once they get there. So, goal number 7, we want you to roll out the welcome mat with your small town charm. We want you to treat your gateways as the front porches of your community. This one gateway at 55 in Salem. The top image on the right is what it looks like today. Does that look like the front porch you want to go sit on for a little while? But the opportunity exists to have an active reuse of a historic structure, a boutique hotel, a multimodal transit station, and a new mixed-use neighborhood commercial building. Small towns also mean unique offerings when it comes to retail and restaurants. So, Salem Heritage Plaza, that's currently the home of Pizza Hut, we have envisioned as a local brewery that may evolve over time to include unique restaurant offerings. Maybe those food trucks are doing so well they decide to open a brick and mortar establishment in the same center. And part of people feeling welcome in your community is how you detail your public spaces. What goes on in those spaces, from giant Jenga to cornhole, to buying fresh produce and local products, to lighting your Christmas tree, all together as a community, and watching your kids put on ice skates for the first time. They walk across the street and sit on the 1939 fire engine and take their picture with Santa Claus. These are all places where you're building memories for these generations. So speaking of that 1939 fire engine, goal number 8 is to honor the history of downtown. We don't want you to live in the past, but we want you to celebrate it. Now, I had the privilege to sit down with some of Apex's longest standing residents at a legacy lunch, people who grew up here and remember it. The Wall Street Journal recently called you all the Millennial Mayberry, if you hadn't heard. So it was such a great experience, and there was actually one lady who couldn't join us for health reasons, Miss Jean Hack, but she took the time to write us a letter, and I want to share a little bit of that letter with you right now.
I was delighted to be asked to talk about growing up in Apex. Growing up here, back then I knew everybody. I always felt safe and secure. We always had a big meal at noon with cornbread and biscuits. Whoever came to our house left with lunch bags to go. When I was about 11 years old, I would skate on roller skates on Highway 55. We rode our bikes everywhere. Once or twice a month, there would be a movie downtown projected onto the side of the building, which is now the Peak Restaurant. We would get inside big cardboard boxes and watch the movies outdoors. We would bring our nickels to play the jukebox and dance. Most teenagers learn to dance there. I hope everyone who lives here can enjoy the good life and be as happy as I have been.
So the Legacy Lunch spurred some design ideas for us, right? To tell this history, to tell the uniquely Apex story, because we felt like it wasn't being told today. There are so many whimsical elements to your history that you could convey in signage and art all around town. So our team embraced the idea of frogs, logs, and beavers, oh my. So we took leftover spaces and created a sense of place and a story about the fact that the log pond used to be right here. We think, right? Yeah. Most generally speaking, it was right there. And that the beavers didn't take it lightly that their pond was gone. We heard a story about a beaver walking down the middle of Salem Street at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, there's that part of the story to tell. Telling the story of the peak of the peak, the Tunstall House and grounds. Celebrate that history and honor it. Create a place for your community, a revenue-generating venue that can be enjoyed by residents and visitors alike, with community gardens and pergola-covered swings along the strollway. This is such a great photo, actually taken yesterday, right? Take a long-standing civic feature of Salem Street and think about it as more than just a gap in that pedestrian experience. Think about it as a public-private partnership, an iconic civic building that signifies safety and protection, while all the while providing active ground floor uses in part of the building, and shade trees, of course. Or maybe the fire station evaluates and decides instead of coming out onto Salem, they want to come out on Seaboard. All of that would need to be discussed with the fire chief, who I don't see in the room at the moment, but he's been a part of the conversation. But the firehouse is part of the story of Salem, So put that 1939 engine front and center in glass, light it up, and celebrate that part of your history. And finally, reimagine spaces through art, innovation, and creativity. This goal is about thinking outside of the box. When you look at spaces around downtown, perfectly fine places that are functioning today, and reimagining what they could be with a little creativity. Now I'm going to tell you, where are you, Julia? Yeah. So Julia gets the gold star for implementation.
Yes.
The charrette was less than 3 months ago, literally. And she has already installed this mural on the preschool. If you haven't seen it, you need to go check it out. Everybody clap for Julia. Or you take a look at the couple of spaces outside of Nick's gallery and you re-envision them as an outdoor dining opportunity. You look at buildings that are supposed to evoke community and culture and art, and you make sure people know it. They know that they need to stop, go in, spend some time. So, this is what you're going to ask me, right? How do you get it done? So, the way you get it done is it goes back to those guiding principles we talked about at the beginning. Every decision you make about downtown, big or small, has to be about planning downtown for people. You put people first, you celebrate Salem Street, and you embrace authentic Apex. We're giving you a top 10 projects we feel like are critical path items that really need to be prioritized to make this vision a reality. Energize the alleys, Seaboard, Commerce, and the Fire Station Alley. Transform the Salem streetscape. Make the transit station at NC 55 and Salem Street a multimodal, iconic gateway feature. Add a net gain of 200 public parking spaces within a 5-minute walk with a minimum of 100 within a 3-minute walk. Install wayfinding signage in and around downtown. Construct 100 new housing units within a 10-minute walk of downtown. Re-envision the fire station site as a civic and mixed-use development. Repurpose the parking area at the depot into the premier public space in downtown. Revitalize the Tunstall House, grounds, and strollway as a pastoral treasure and link between Salem and the Civic Center. And attract 5 new restaurants, bars, breweries, and a boutique hotel. So we also think there are a couple of key indicators that are going to let us know when you're starting to see that success happen. 1, Salem Street will be full of people night and day. Retail and restaurant rents will outperform office. We've added 100 more units to the downtown area. We've created a real parking problem. People of all ages, ethnicities, and economic levels will be downtown. Entrepreneurs will have opened 10 more businesses. Children will be playing and making memories downtown. Residents and visitors will know the story of downtown Apex. People will reach downtown Apex by walking, biking, and car, and autonomous shuttle. Partnerships and old-fashioned hard work will have made it happen. So what's next? For our team, we're going to go back to the office and we're going to create a document for you. We're going to deliver that document to your staff and steering committee on October the 7th. We will be putting that draft out for public view in November online. And in December, there's anticipated town council and planning board hearings. Updates will, of course, be posted online, and if you're on the email list, you'll hear all about this because they are fabulous about letting you know. Now, what our team does is intended to push you and make you think outside the box. But I have to tell you that I'm so excited to deliver this plan to you and watch the creative forces of this community make it come to life. It has been an honor to work on this project, My team is fantastic. Much of the beautiful things you see on the wall tonight are due to them. We are going to actually get your opinion about a couple of the things we talked about tonight, including the Salem Street options and the top 10. So our team is going to retire down to the atrium space, along with all the plan ambassadors. Raise your hand. You're in the cute gray shirts. Steering committee members. I love their shirts. They're all wearing gray. So if you will, when you walk out of the room, I want you to grab one of the polling sheets and a pen, take it downstairs with you, think about how you want to prioritize those top 10 projects, think about the option you want for Salem Street, and with that, I want to say have a great evening. It's been my pleasure.